and I want to make a bit of a kind of uplifting video about how you can use sport positively in your life. And so this has come a little bit from my own experience in that I think that, well, personally, I think that sport has a massive impact on how you perform as a lawyer. But then I actually did the research and I wrote it all down. Okay, so firstly, the impact of sport is on your mood. And you may notice that I'm a quite upbeat person, and I of course have my really bad moments just like everybody else. But in general, since I started paying attention to sport and the impact it has on me as a person, I have become a happier person. And the reason is for this is because there is a chemical released called endorphins. And you may have heard of runner's high, and endorphins is the reason for the runner's high. And it's what gives you this kind of feeling of contentment and happiness that it's kind of the same feeling you get from when you have lots of chocolate. Oh yes, they have done studies which have proven that sport affects your mood. And in the same breath, actually, it increases your concentration. This is because there is blood flow going to your brain at a higher rate. So as in, your circulation is better because you have been working your aerobic and anaerobic systems, and increased blood flow to your brain means you have better concentration levels. I wrote this. If you just Google law care and dealing with pressure, I think was the name of the article. Yeah, so I wrote an article about dealing with pressure in the workplace, and I actually talk a lot in that article about how doing sport and how staying fit and active can make your decision-making abilities increase. And this is because, and I borrowed this from the pressure book called The Pressure Principle, which was about how pilots are taught to be very, very fit. And because they're very, very fit, their heart rate stays low. And when your heart rate stays low, your cognitive abilities aren't cut off as quickly. So for example, when your heart rate starts going above 100 beats per minute, the blood flow goes away from the brain. So that's why if you're fitter and you keep your heart rate low, you make better decisions. Your sleep will improve. It's a no-brainer. There is another reason which has been spoken about a lot, and it's in comparing high performing business people to high performing sports people, which is the corporate athlete theory. You may have heard me speak about this before. So this theory comes from two psychologists called Schwartz and Layer, and that was in a 2011 or 12 Harvard Business Review article. And in that, as I said, they just compared corporate athletes to real athletes, and they found that there was a crossover between the traits in the two groups. And broadly, the similarities were in the areas of emotional, spiritual, physical, and mental abilities. So they discuss a phenomenon called the ideal performance state, or the IPS. And in performance psychology, this is the capacity to mobilize energy on demand. And it has two components, which is the stressing and then oscillation, which is recovery or backing off. Okay, so I'm going to explain that slowly. So it's the capacity to mobilize energy on demand. So as we know from junior cert science, energy cannot be created or destroyed, it can only be transferred. So we all have a certain amount of energy we begin with every day. But as I said before, sport increases your mood and your well-being, so you'll naturally have more energy. It's counterintuitive, you'll naturally have more energy when you do sport. We all know people who are very, very unhealthy, and they function very well in a job, but for a very long career, or for, we'll say, like for longevity in their career, that type of behavior won't carry them until the end. Normally, for people with long careers, they do have some sense of well-being or activity outside of the workplace, and this is what sustains them. So for example, like Elon Musk, he's a very active person. Or if you look at even Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who is one of the Supreme Court justices, very famous Supreme Court justice, she lifts weights every day, and they look after their bodies because they know a healthy body will equal a healthy mind. The stress and the oscillation, so stress and recovery. So what is common to both corporate athletes and normal athletes is the stress of a muscle and then the recovery. So for example, if you're on a project, there's going to be a certain amount, there's going to be like one stage of the project where everybody is going towards the finish line, just like you would in a race. And that is the most stressful part of the project, is the final stages. Just like in a race, the final stages of the race are very, very stressful. But what is extremely important in both cases is that there is rest and relaxation after the race or the end of the project, and there is time to reflect on how the race or the project went. In triathlon, that way of thinking from sport carried right over to my professional life as a solicitor, and has made it so much better because I finally understand now how high performers and high achievers actually manage. They understand, just like the corporate athlete does, that there needs to be stress so that there is growth. So when you stress a muscle, it hurts, but when you stress it, it means it's growing and it's going to get bigger, but you have to recover to allow it to grow, or otherwise you're just going to break it down and you're going to be left with no muscle. That's why people take protein shakes after the gym, because the muscle is in recovery and what they're doing is they're feeding the growth. By a long shot, the most difficult sports, like last year, 2019 for me sport wise was crazy. And it was my first trail marathon and my first Ironman, and both of those pushed me to limits I thought I wasn't capable of. But what I realized from both of those races was that the same is true in business. You can push yourself. Now, albeit you have to recover afterwards, but you can stretch. And I use the word stretch because that's a buzzword in self-development. But you can stretch yourself to the next level if you set the goal and go and do it. But it's so important to recover, and unfortunately a lot of the times I did not appreciate the importance of recovery, and I got very, very injured. And as I said before, if you want to play the long game, if you want longevity, you have to recover after every race. I don't think law helps sport. I don't think it works conversely. I think having a very active sports life outside of law really, really does help, and it makes the career seem much more rich, and it definitely encourages me in terms of longevity. Yeah. See you in the next one. Please like and subscribe, and see me also on Instagram at LawHeroIRL. info@lawhero.eu. Thank you.